Happy Thursday, everyone. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day today. My name is Andrew Heichman. I'm the lead forecaster here in WW116. So in today's video, we'll be taking a look at the tropics like we usually do. We're still monitoring that disturbance that's in the Eastern Pacific, in which we'll get to in a moment. We'll be taking a look at the Storm Prediction Center because we do have the threat for severe weather over the next few days. Storm Prediction Center even has a day 4 highlighted. So we'll pay attention to that when we get there. We'll be taking a look at some forecast models, of course, regarding the severe weather. We'll be taking a look at some satellite imagery, to kind of see what the weather's like across the country. And we'll be taking a look at the National Weather Service hazards like we usually do. So basically warnings, watches, advisories, etc. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get on into it. So throughout the next 5 days, really not any tropical, activity is expected in the Atlantic Ocean. We are kind of in a quiet period, but like I've said millions of times, we are still in hurricane season. That still is in effect until November 31st, I believe. So we do have, quite a bit of time left in the season. However, we are kind of in a kind of a quiet zone in terms of the Atlantic. So there's really nothing expected throughout the next, basically the work week through the next 5 days. However, we do move on to the Eastern Pacific. We actually do have a disturbance we've been monitoring for the last 2 days. The chances actually increase. So throughout 5 days, it has a high 90% chance of formation. So this thing will likely form further down the line. It's almost certain at this point. Formation chance through 48 hours, so basically 2 days, is a medium 40%. This is actually increased. So basically, what this is showing, this X, is this is actually where the area of low pressure is currently located, and it shows a little arrow moving into this kind of circle. This circle is the area where it could develop. This X is the area of the low pressure, and basically once this X goes into this circle, this is whenever you'll have your highest chance of this thing forming. This is basically the area where we think that a tropical cyclone will form. So overall, chances of this thing forming is actually pretty high, with a high 90% chance. Overall formation through 48 hours or 2 days is also pretty much a medium 40% chance. So that's basically what we're dealing with in terms of that system. So we'll keep an eye on this. So probably next time that we make a video, tomorrow, this thing will likely be a tropical cyclone at that point. So we move on to the Central Pacific. Nothing going on here either. The Atlantic and the Central Pacific are kind of dead. However, we have all of our eyes on the Eastern Pacific as of now. So moving on to the Storm Prediction Center, we do have a marginal risk in effect for today, stretching all the way down from Alabama through New York, stretching bits through the Ohio Valley into the northeast, actually southeast into the Ohio Valley and into the northeast here. So we basically also have another marginal threat here, basically on western Texas, you can see. In terms of tornadoes, we don't really expect anything. However, there is kind of a glitch here. We do see a 2% area here, but there's really nothing selected, so that's honestly kind of weird. But we move on to winds. We do have the threat for wind damage being basically 60 miles per hour or more in these areas. So every single 25 miles, you have a chance for winds being greater than 50 knots or so, which is basically 55 miles per hour, kind of near 60, which the severe criteria is 58 miles per hour or more. We do also have that little 5% chance here, basically in western Texas as well. In terms of hail, we do have a 5% chance over here in western Texas. However, there is really no hail chance, or if there is, it'll be like really little and not severe here across where we see that, from Alabama through basically western New York. So there's really no hail threat for that. Basically, the main driver for this system right here, this marginal risk, is just wind damage, potentially, gusting over severe. And then, of course, we do have the hail and wind threat here for basically western Texas. So it gets kind of interesting the further we go out. So for day 2, there's really not much going on here. We do have a little bit of a marginal risk here for the mid-Atlantic. However, I do say that there will be a severe threat for, basically across the East Coast. The timing is just kind of bad here, in which that the coverage zone is kind of gapped between, where the storms can fire over here. But basically, there is a marginal risk in effect here for basically, eastern North Carolina here with 0% tornado probabilities. It's under the 2%. We do have 5%, chance for wind damage, and then, of course, a 0% chance for hail. So that's what we're dealing with in terms of that. We move on to day 3. We do have another marginal risk here, basically throughout the central Great Plains, moving into the Midwest for areas such as Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, and Missouri. We don't really have a breakdown for this. However, we can see the isolated large hail, basically is the main threat. So basically a risk for mainly isolated large hail. So basically probably a cooler atmosphere above, maybe some dry conditions, in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, which would be favorable for the development for some hail. So we'll take a look at that. Now here's the interesting part. We move on to day 4 here. There's already a 15% chance. Now, this is, showing that there is, a good amount of agreement with this, that the Storm Prediction Center actually posts out basically a 4 through 8 severe weather outlook, showing that there's a 15% chance of severe weather here, across the bits of the Midwest and into basically the southern Great Plains here and the bits of the Southeast, in which you can see here, stretching from Texas all the way up through Missouri. So there's a decent chance that we could see some, basically some severe storms. So what does this say? It basically says, shortwave trough. So usually with shortwave troughs, you can see like tornadoes and stuff, but I'd have to, basically dive into the system more, which we'll actually look at whenever we go to models here momentarily. So that's basically what we're dealing with. So throughout the next 3 days, we do have the chance for severe weather, of course, through the next 3 days being a marginal risk in effect. So let's go ahead and take a look here at forecast models. I guess we'll take a look here at NAM. Let's go ahead and take a look at this first. So basically, we're going to take a look at Supercell Composite. This is basically just instability, moisture, and shear kind of all mixed together to kind of show what the highlighted area of severe storms is. We'll take some soundings inside of these areas too. But you can kind of see that we have this low area. We have this area of low pressure moving, basically to the east-northeast here. Basically a little, kind of a weak cold front along with it. It is ejecting some moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, moving it into inland, in which we do have these, small threat for severe weather. We actually, if we look at radar, actually my radar shut down apparently. But if we look at radar, there's actually a few storms that are firing, across basically southern Mississippi here and into Alabama. So we go ahead and take a sounding for this. This is actually at 00Z, so this is actually this is old data. So we'll go ahead and move a little bit further in the future. You can kind of see that this kind of does stretch from basically New York all the way down to the southeast, in which we did see that marginal risk in effect for today. So that's basically what we're dealing with there. So let's go ahead and take a sounding here for basically near central Alabama, and let's kind of see what it's talking about in terms of, what specifications we might see. So we do have a slight veering wind shear pattern. However, wind shear total is not really the strongest, but we do have that veering wind shear pattern, so a weak tornado could be possible. We do have, basically, even though there is no threat for, that tornado, basically based off the Storm Prediction Center, but we do have, it does look like we do have a slight veering wind shear pattern. However, the shear is kind of weak, but it would not be impossible for a tornado or two to pop up. We do have 67-degree dew points, which is showing a pretty moisture-filled surface, which is actually good. Dews in the 60s and 70s is kind of like the ballpark zone for that. Wet bulb zero temperature, really goes under 700 millibars. That's showing that we could see some pretty large hailers in terms of that. Precipitable water is also pretty low, so there's less weight being pushed down on the updraft, which only allows, more stronger vertical velocities, which can basically hold hailstones up in the air. But, relatively dry atmosphere here. As you can see, the dew points is pretty far away from your dry bulb temperature, which is showing that the relative humidity is actually quite low. There's really not much water vapor in here. Of course, that will change once you get a partial rising in terms of, humidity would actually go up to 100%. But, it's relatively a dry atmosphere, which is actually kind of needed for storms. We look at terms of instability, we do have 2300 mixed layer cape. That's plenty enough instability. Downdraft cape or downwards cape, basically D cape, showing, about 900. So you could have basically like the marginal effects of damaging winds in the sounding alone. But that's basically what we're dealing with in terms of that. So overall, not too bad. The main problem here, like the thermodynamics are good. Basically, like the temperatures and stuff are good. The only kind of, problem we have here is kind of weak wind shear. However, it's pointing in the right direction. We do have that veering wind shear pattern, which usually highlights that there could be some tornadoes possible. So we move in further. We can actually see where we do have, kind of a stronger event going on here. This is actually later in the NAM model. This is for that day 4 we were talking about. We can kind of see that the Supercell Composite values really kind of ramp up. So we're going to take a sounding here for central Missouri. This is at 21Z, so this is basically, afternoon moving into the evening here. We do have a good amount of shear, it looks like. We might have a little bit of a veering wind shear pattern, which can support tornadoes. Wet bulb zero temperature, just a little bit under 700 millibars. That's good for hailers. Precipitable water, 1.22 inches. That's basically less weight pushing down on your updraft. Downdraft cape, we're over 1,000 joules per kilogram, so definitely damaging winds can be a possibility. Overall instability, about 2,158 mixed layer cape, which in terms of this, we have moisture in the upper 60s, so this is really kind of a good sounding. So to me, this is showing that we could see some large hail, some damaging winds, and potentially a tornado or two. So definitely have to keep out on that, as we do have another area of low pressure that will be moving to the east. So we'll go ahead and move this a little bit further. We'll take another sounding here. We'll actually take one here, basically in central, central Arkansas here, and we'll go ahead and see kind of what this one is saying. So it looks like we might have a little bit of a cap in place. So basically, this could help. This could kind of hold off some storms firing a bit. But however, I do believe they could push through. Basically, your wet bulb 0 is slightly above 700 millibars, so you could probably see some small hail with this. We do have that nice veering wind shear pattern. We do have the sickle-shaped hodograph, showing that basically the wind shear is veering, basically changing as you go up in the atmosphere. So it starts off with your basically your lower level jet, moving, ejecting air to the north, and then you go up in the atmosphere. Basically, the winds will be blowing to the east. So generally, we do have that that nice veering wind shear pattern, which can support tornadoes. In terms of that, in terms of thermodynamics, we do have basically mixed layer cape showing our instability of about 1,800 joules per kilogram. That's definitely a good amount of instability to support definitely storms. We do have the downdraft cape about over 1,000 joules per kilogram, so definitely could see some gusty winds with some of those downdrafts that you might see. So that's basically what we're dealing with in terms of that. We'll go ahead and go back here a little bit. We'll go ahead and take one for basically northeastern Oklahoma. This is a little bit before. This is actually 12Z, so this would be kind of early in the morning. I believe this is like 7 o'clock, basically like 7 o'clock a.m. Central Time. So it does look like storms probably would not fire due to we do have a cap here. Basically, you can see essentially what that means. The people who don't really understand this is basically this is just preventing thunderstorms from forming, pretty much just kind of pushing down on a thunderstorm's updraft and preventing it from rising any further. However, as the surface does heat up, this will actually cool down a bit, and basically basically anything that tries to rise will be able to rise up into the atmosphere. So basically, in terms of this decape, about 990. So this, like I said, this is kind of early. We do have the wind shear, of course. We do have the dew points, definitely the moisture here at the surface. We do have enough instability and stuff. However, that cap would probably prevent anything from forming. So that's kind of the main area there, because like I said, it is kind of early in the morning here. And so basically, it could be, an issue for storms to form further down the line. So that's basically what we're dealing with in terms of that. So we do have the threat for severe weather. You can see kind of Supercell Composite, kind of showing a mix of all that area. And then you have that secondary low that forms and moves to the east here. So that's basically what we're dealing with in terms of the models. We're not really breaking those down too much. We just took a look at some soundings here. We'll even take a cherry pick sounding here just to kind of see what the worst kind of case scenario we can see is. That'll be kind of interesting to kind of see what we are looking. And then after that, we'll be moving on to the current, basically the current condition. So this is showing PDS tornado. This is contaminated, so basically this sounding is useless. However, we do have that nice veering wind shear pattern. Dew points in the 60s. We do have, kind of a dry atmosphere in the mid to upper levels of the atmosphere, which is good. Decape above basically 1,000 joules per kilogram. Mixed layer cape over 2,500 joules per kilogram. So pretty much a good thing, but like I said, the sounding is contaminated, so this sounding best belongs in the trash. So, moving on to the current satellite here, we do have basically that area of low pressure that, this was actually the same low that produced all the snow across the northwest. This is actually tracked to the east. It's over now Michigan at this point. You can kind of see where this front is. It's basically, bringing up some clouds across the region. Over the last few days here across the mid-Atlantic, especially here in northern Virginia, it's been beautiful, clear skies. However, clouds will likely build in overnight as this front does get closer to our region. However, you move to basically the central Great Plains, you can see mostly it's pretty sunny here, especially across the southwest here. You can see it's relatively sunny. We probably do have some clouds here, basically, in the northern Great Plains here, but, overall, kind of a nice day, but you are being affected by this, this front that is moving across. My drive temperature is a little bit lower than that. So we can go ahead and take a look here at 500 millibar analysis. You can actually see where that area of low pressure here is. This is basically your trough dipping down here. This is where your area of low is, and it's generally moving to the east, northeast. So, moving on to the National Weather Service hazards. This is the last bit for today's video. We'll go ahead and look at the non-precipitation side of things. We do have high wind warnings in effect for basically western Oregon here. High wind watches in effect for some areas, basically here in the darker regions here. And we do have wind advisories in effect for basically bits of the the northwest here, showing that winds, could be gusty at times. We move in terms of winter here. We do have freeze warnings in effect for basically bits of Minnesota, Wisconsin as well, and Iowa, and basically Nebraska here, basically eastern Nebraska. All of these are expecting freezing temperatures tonight, so it could be, sensitive to, crops and stuff, and basically vegetation and everything. So If you have any sensitive plants, make sure to bring them inside. Like I said, we do have freeze warnings in effect for these areas. So then we move on to the flooding side of things. We do have flash flood watches for bits of Northern California, so flooding could be a problem down the line. And then, of course, we do have flood warnings in effect still for basically bits of the coast of Texas here, basically Georgia here as well. And we do still have that that little flood warning in effect for basically extreme northeastern Indiana as well. So that's basically what we're dealing with for today's update. If you guys I can't even say that properly, but if you guys have any questions, you can leave them in the comments below, and I'll be sure to basically get to them, and I'll answer any questions you might have. But anyways, guys, I hope everyone has a wonderful day today. My name is Andrew Heischman. I'm the lead forecaster here at NWW116, and I'll see you guys in the next video.